Welcome to Meet Me at the Deli, the food advice podcast where the pickles and slaw are always free. I'm Liz.
And I'm Jeffrey. Every episode, we're answering your burning food and culinary questions and sharing stories and insights from years working in the industry and living in our self-made shtetl. So for the uninitiated, can you just tell us what is the Settlement Cookbook?
What is the Settlement Cookbook?
And we should note we have copies of the Settlement Cookbook around down here, and some actually they're all on the table here. But we'll get into these copies shortly.
We'll get into it.
What is it? Tell us. And how did you come to write a book about this cookbook?
Okay, so the Settlement Cookbook is a charitable community cookbook that came out of a settlement house in Milwaukee in 1901. And
what is a settlement house?
Okay, thank you for asking, Jeffrey. So the settlement movement started in England, in London, really. It's kind of the precursor to social work. And settlement houses were created to help the urban poor kind of find jobs, stay off the streets, et cetera, et cetera. When the movement in the 19th century came to the United States, it became clear that the urban poor were primarily immigrants. So they started doing things like teaching English. They had cooking classes. They had all kinds of different clubs. So this particular settlement house in Milwaukee was run by a woman named Elizabeth Candor. And she taught a very popular cooking class, and it was a kosher cooking class because of the Eastern European immigrants who came. And it was a Jewish settlement, which they weren't all. Many of these settlement houses were run by liberal Protestants. The most famous settlement house was Hull House in Chicago, which a lot of people know about Jane Addams. So Lizzie Candor was often called the Jane Addams of Milwaukee. And this was specifically a Jewish settlement house meant to deal with Eastern European immigrants who had come over relatively recently.
And she was German, right?
German Jewish. But she was born in the States. Oh. Her parents, actually, I think it was her grandparents who were immigrants from Central Europe.
So her family had been well established in the United States, but they were Jewish.
She was part of an acculturated, Reform Jewish community. And her father had a store, and she worked in it. Anyway, so she taught this cooking class. And at the time, community cookbooks or fundraising cookbooks had become really popular, particularly with women's groups.
Yeah, shout out to probably a lot of our listeners who probably have some synagogue cookbook in their house or some community cookbook that they've seen, and the recipes are all kooky, crazy seeming, and there's drawings and it's whatever. But those were, they were huge for decades.
They were huge. And people still do them. But yeah, they started around the Civil War. The first noted one was at the Great Sanitary Fair in Philadelphia.
Sounds like a great time.
I know. I know. So yeah, that was the kickoff. But these things became definitely used for not just fundraising for organizations, but also for causes. So there's a temperance cookbook, there's a suffrage cookbook. But yeah, churches and synagogues picked it up very quickly. And so the story, this is steeped in Milwaukee lore, is that Lizzie Candor was these kids spend so much time writing down the recipes. We lose the time we could be doing our cooking.
The kids, as in those working at the settlement?
The girls
coming
that
to the
took
cooking class.
Taking the cooking class. So they're all writing the recipes down.
They were writing the recipes down. So she thought, well, what we could do is have a charitable cookbook where the recipes for the classes are in it. And then we can also have some other recipes in there that we like. And then we can sell it to the students for a very small fee, but maybe a little bit more for everybody else. Candor goes to the board of the Jewish Mission, which is what it was called at the time, and says, can I have $18 to print this? And they said, no. And they said it seemed like an extravagance.
It's 1900. It's the year 1900.
It's the year 1900.
Yeah.
They're like, No, but then they kind of joked that like they'd be happy to share in the profits. So she was like, well, I know people. So if you look at any of the earlier editions of the Settlement Cookbook, there are ads in the front and the back. So she had friends who had a printing press. She went to them. She raised money for ads. So they started selling these cookbooks at the Boston store, which was a department store in town. And then it kind of filtered into Chicago, and they all sold out. And, their first run of 500 copies just like disappeared immediately. But 9 years later, she was able to buy these dudes at the mission a new house for the settlement.
Because the book was that popular.
Yeah, so over time, it went through 40 different editions, sold over 2 million copies, and really spans like a century, from 1901 to 1991.
That was the last published edition?
The last published edition was 1991. Also, there was concern that spices would make you drink more.
Right. There's a lot of that in your book, that like these kind of spices and stuff also cause people to crave alcohol.
Right.
That was like a real concern that people had.
This is during the temperance movement, which precedes the suffrage movement. But it's a lot of the same players, right, that are involved in all of these things, right? There's a big concern about drunkenness. There's a big concern about men abusing their wives because of that they would go, instead of going home for dinner like a good man should, he would drink away their earnings after a long day of work and then come home and, beat his wife, right? So a lot of these cooking schools that had classes were like, this is supposed to make it nice for a man to come home, right?
Oh, that's why it's called The Way to a Man's Heart.
It could be the reason it's called.
Yeah, that's actually
that's the title.
Right, The Way to a Man's Heart, the Settlement Cookbook. That was like the original title for the book.
That was the original title of the book, yeah. They were actually really litigious about this, too. The Way to a Man's Heart, anytime you saw anything like that used that expression related to cooking, they kind of went after them. It was like really like
Lizzie Kander didn't fuck around.
Yeah, and
for
it was
real. That's obvious.
So that was they had some lawyers at the ready.
Yeah. Well, this is so interesting though, because I always like knew about that, like this immorality, this conception of spicy foods and garlicky foods and pungent foods, flavors being immoral. And pickles were one of the culprits. Pickles were seen as an immoral food for that reason. And so I always, it's so funny because to me, I now I'm eating like a lacto-fermented, a pickle. I'm like, this is so good for my gut. I'm like communing with my ancestors. I'm like, appreciating New York history, all these kinds of things. And yet this was an immoral food, a food that was known for licentiousness or seen for potentially promoting bad behavior in men. And what a wild, been a long 120 years or so,
I mean, there definitely were reports from settlement workers that like Jewish mothers gave their children too many pickles, right? Like that was not good for them. And
would not have done well.
No. The more it grew, the more traditionally Ashkenazi Jewish recipes were in it. But also the treif got upped a lot as well.
Treif meaning not kosher, meaning things that traditionally observant Jews do not eat, like pork, shellfish, and dairy and meat, the same dish.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
There's a whole seafood, shellfish section, and yeah.
Yeah, there's ham in the first edition.
What is a bacon sandwich casserole? Yeah.
A bacon sandwich?
Bacon sandwich casserole. Yeah, I found it. I have it here.
Huh.
What's relevant here, I think, is that the Jews that had been there, the acculturated Jews, the Lizzie Kanders, the people who had created the settlement houses or were running the settlement houses, were largely not keeping kosher. They were not observing the Jewish dietary laws.
No, and the majority of American Jews in the country already who were affiliated with any kind of religious community were Reform.
And so they were not, kosher was seen as a little bit outdated, maybe
the Reform
antiquated.
movement actually expressly rejects it in the 1880s.
Right.
With their Pittsburgh platform. And also, there is this very kind of dramatic moment when the first graduating class of Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati,
the Reform Rabbinical
School, like it's the first time that there are like American minted rabbis because they used to import them, right? Or they didn't have a rabbi, right? They had like a lay leader or a cantor or something. So this was a big deal. This is an American movement. These are American rabbis. It's awesome. They invite all of these Jewish dignitaries to this event. It's huge. And it is a completely non-kosher soup to nuts, like completely, clams on the half shell come
Frog's
out.
legs and on there, yeah.
There's like cream sauce over the steak,
Oh my gosh.
And but there is no pork. There's shellfish, but no pork.
Right. Pork's the line.
Pork is the line for a lot of people. The apocryphal story, though, is that a bunch of guys got up. They were so outraged. It was so offensive to them that, like, there is this Jewish event. If they were anywhere else in the world and they were invited as rabbis to a Jewish event, there would be food that they could eat. And so they got up, stormed out, and started the conservative movement. So that's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly what happened, but it is kind of what happened.
This is called the Treif banquet. The Treif
banquet.
So when I was in high school, I remember I learned about this, and I remember because I went to a conservative Jewish day school, and we learned. And we learned literally that they got up and they started the conservative movement. Like this was it. Too much, yeah.